A family trip to nature, the perfect way to escape from all your worries. But what if this getaway turns into the most terrifying challenge of your life? What lies beneath the calm surface will shock you, and I'm sure you won't want to miss the climax. It was one of those rare decisions I made in life just to please my wife. Lisa had been saying for a while that we needed to get out into nature, but lately I had started to notice a growing distance between us. Instead of wasting more time arguing, I agreed to her plan. My son and I sat silently in the car while Lisa remained absorbed in something on her screen. I kept thinking about how much life had changed. Not so long ago, our family was different, harmonious evenings filled with conversation and laughter. But now, we were just drifting disconnected. I didn't have the energy for conversation, but a certain tension lingered in the air. When we arrived, my mother-in-law, Elsa, showed up as usual, bringing supplies. There was something strange about her gaze. She appeared as confident as ever, but there was a shadow in her eyes that made me uneasy. I tried to brush it off, but her attention toward me felt excessive, as if she were trying to hide something, or perhaps tell me something, through her gaze rather than words. Lisa busied herself with organizing, our son darted around, and Elsa seemed oblivious to it all, focusing on me again. She asked questions that didn't seem to matter, as if she were probing for something hidden within me. I stayed quiet, knowing she was always a master manipulator searching for weaknesses. Soon we gathered around the fire. Lisa chatted softly about work, our son was overjoyed, and I struggled to avoid looking at Elsa, who kept glancing at me for just a moment too long. Her gaze felt sharp, like a beam of light piercing through me. I tried to steer the conversation, focusing on the simplicity of a relaxing evening. But I couldn't shake the feeling that her attention was deliberate, as though she was trying to uncover something. The more I ignored it, the heavier her silent gaze felt, making her presence almost palpable even when I looked away. We sat down for dinner, but something felt off. Lisa, focused on heating up food, barely paid attention to us. Our son stared at the flickering flames, lost in his own little world. But Elsa, on the other hand, seemed to be the centerpiece of the scene. Her gaze lingered on me a little longer than was comfortable. When she spoke, her tone felt overly soft, almost tender. I tried to focus on her words, but they turned into background noise. My attention was drawn to her gaze instead. It was direct, almost challenging, yet not hostile. I felt my fingertips go numb, as though my body was reacting to something I couldn't yet comprehend. "Have you been driving for a long time?" she asked suddenly. The question seemed odd. We discussed this countless times before. Why was she asking now? I gave a short answer, but she didn't break eye contact. Lisa said something, distracting me. I found myself relieved by the interruption. But as soon as Lisa turned back to her tasks, I felt Elsa's gaze again. She laughed at something my son said, but her eyes found mine once more. I pretended to be interested in the fire. The wood cracked and the embers glowed, but her presence filled the space with tension. When I glanced back at her, she was silent, her posture confident. It seemed like she was waiting for something to move from me. When night fell over the campsite, I couldn't get her face out of my mind. In the tent, darkness surrounded us, but the tension remained. The night was cold, and the tent felt smaller than I remembered. Lisa quickly fell asleep, wrapped in her sleeping bag, while I lay staring at the fabric ceiling. Elsa was lying nearby. The silence only amplified her presence. I tried to close my eyes, but the feeling that she wasn't asleep kept me restless. I could hear her breathing, steady but deliberate, as if every movement echoed in my mind. The tent shifted slightly as she moved. Her hand accidentally brushed against mine. It was almost instantaneous, but my body reacted with a jolt. Everything I had been trying to suppress flared up all at once. "Sorry," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but that simple word felt loaded with something more. I wanted to respond, but the words caught in my throat. My hand twitched slightly, as if I might reach for hers, but I stopped myself in time. I could feel her waiting for something. Her body remained still, but the silence between us was louder than any words could have been. I lay in the tent, listening to the faint rustling of the wind outside. Lisa slept peacefully beside me, her breathing steady and calm. But I couldn't find any peace. I tried to push away the thoughts that had begun to overwhelm me, but they kept coming back like waves crashing against the shore. Elsa, lying so close, seemed to sense my internal struggle. I heard her shift slightly. The faint sound of her movements echoed in my head. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. "Yeah, I'm fine," I finally said, but it wasn't true. My heart was racing. Why was she asking? Why did her tone carry an intimacy that seemed to cut right through me? She said nothing more, but her silence only heightened the tension. I could feel her eyes on me, even without looking. I wanted to get up, step outside, and take a breath of fresh air, but my body felt glued to the spot. I tried to focus on my breathing, but each breath grew heavier. A voice in my head whispered, "This is wrong. You can't let yourself even think about this." But that voice was drowned out by something primal, something raw. When I finally turned to face her, her eyes were already locked on mine. It wasn't just a look. It carried a mix of expectation and understanding. She didn't say a word, but in that moment, something inside me broke. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Everything else faded. Time seemed to stand still, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. Morning came as if nothing had happened. Lisa, as energetic as ever, busied herself with breakfast. Her voice carried the same light-hearted tone as she playfully nudged our son, who was in no hurry to help. I sat motionless, feeling as though my world had been turned upside down. My movements felt robotic, as if I were inhabiting someone else's life. Elsa, as always, appeared perfectly composed. Her hair was neatly arranged, and a faint smile played on her lips. Yet something in her gaze had shifted. She avoided direct eye contact with me, but every gesture, every word, seemed to echo within me. "You didn't sleep well, did you?" Lisa asked, looking at me over her cup of coffee. My chest tightened. It was an innocent question, but I couldn't help hearing reproach in it. "Yeah, it was cold," I lied, forcing my voice to stay calm. Our son burst into laughter, tossing a piece of bread into the air. The sound snapped me back to the moment. Lisa continued fussing over breakfast, oblivious to the tension that hung thick in the air. Elsa remained quiet. Her movements were smooth and deliberate, almost as if she were trying to avoid unnecessary noise. At one point, our eyes met. It lasted only a second, but it hit me like a lightning bolt. In her eyes, I saw a reflection of my own fears and doubts. I quickly looked away, focusing on the coffee cup in my hands. The warmth of the coffee brought some comfort, but it couldn't wash away what had transpired the night before. It started with small things. Lisa began spending more time with our son, immersing herself in his activities. Evenings that were once shared over conversations on the couch disappeared. Instead, she would settle down with her phone, lost in endless scrolling or chatting with colleagues. I couldn't blame her. After all, I was the one who felt like an outsider in our family. But how could I explain what was happening to me? We still talked, but our words felt empty. It was as if we both knew something had changed, but neither of us wanted to be the first to acknowledge it. I tried suggesting we spend time together, but she always had excuses. "Our son's tired, work is hectic, let's plan for tomorrow." Elsa, on the other hand, was always there. Her calm demeanor, her attentiveness, her subtle gestures of care became a breath of fresh air for me. She noticed things Lisa seemed to have stopped seeing. One evening, after Lisa had gone to put our son to bed in the tent, I found myself alone with Elsa by the campfire. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows, and the stillness of the forest wrapped around us like a dense fog. "You look tired," she said, handing me a cup of tea. I nodded, feeling her words pierce straight to the heart of my exhaustion. "It's not always easy, is it?" she added, her eyes meeting mine. A lump rose in my throat. There was no judgment in her voice, only understanding. "No, it's not easy," I admitted, finally allowing myself to say it aloud. From that day forward, everything changed. Lisa and I spoke less and less. Her smile began to feel forced, her attention shallow. She either didn't notice what was happening or chose to ignore it. Meanwhile, I felt as though my inner world was crumbling, yet in that destruction, I found a strange sense of comfort. Elsa became my anchor. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped outside to clear my head. The sky was filled with stars, and the air was crisp and invigorating. Elsa followed me out. Her footsteps were quiet, but I felt her presence immediately. "Would you change anything if you could?" she asked suddenly. I froze. Her words hit me squarely in the chest. "I don't know." I finally replied after a long pause. "Sometimes it feels like all of this is just a dream. But when I wake up, I realize it's reality." She nodded, her gaze filled with a quiet understanding. "Sometimes life gives us things we never expected," she said, lightly placing her hand on mine. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened. We were no longer trying to fight it. This had become our new normal. When I returned to the tent, Lisa was already asleep. I lay down beside her, but I felt an infinite distance between us. My heart was with Elsa, and I knew I could never go back to the way things used to be. The journey doesn't end here. There's so much more to discover. Press now to dive into the next chapter of Unforgettable Stories,